Let's shift focus to the other big story that we're tracking here on Brass Tacks, and this is a major diplomatic showdown between India and Canada. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau claimed a potential link between Indian government officials and the killing of a Khalistani radical, Hardeep Singh Nijjar. In fact, Hardeep Singh Nijjar, who was wanted by the Indian government, was killed in a targeted shooting that happened in Surrey in British Columbia. This was back in June of this year. India has strongly rejected all the allegations by Justin Trudeau. In fact, the MEA released a very strongly worded statement saying that the charges are absurd and motivated and meant to divert attention from the activities of Khalistani separatists inside Canada. The MEA has also said that such unsubstantiated allegations simply seek to shift the focus away from Khalistani terrorists and extremists. The Canadian High Commissioner Cameron McKay was summoned today, and he was told that a senior Canadian diplomat is being expelled. This was in response to Canada expelling a senior Indian diplomat in Ottawa, Pawan Kumar Rai. The deterioration of ties was evident at the G20 summit as well, with serious charges from the Canadian government. Is it time now for India to harden its stand and reset ties with Canada? Send out the clear and unequivocal message that until Canada stops giving safe haven and sanctuary to these Khalistani elements, the relationship cannot be back to normal.
Over the past number of weeks, Canadian security agencies have been actively pursuing credible allegations of a potential link between agents of the government of India and the killing of a Canadian citizen, Hardeep Singh Nijjar.
And as of today, and as a consequence, we've expelled a top Indian diplomat from Canada.
All right, joining us now on this talking point, Terry Miliuski is the author of Blood for Blood, 50 Years of the Global Khalistan Movement. Kamal Sibal is former Foreign Secretary, and Puneet Sani, author and Khalistan expert. Terry Miliuski, when a Prime Minister of a country stands up in Parliament and makes extremely serious allegations against a foreign government, it has to be backed by some form of evidence. Neither has Mr. Trudeau said that in his brief intervention in Parliament, nor has the Canadian government shared that either publicly or with the Indian government. So on what basis is he making this allegation?
Well, we don't know. That's the problem. There's a giant hole in what the Prime Minister is saying. Where's the evidence? The problem starts with the whole allegation in the first place, the allegation that a series of Khalistani leaders, well, okay, it was only three, and one of them died of leukemia, and it wasn't really much of a series. But anyway, the idea was, and this was put about by the Khalistani movement generally as an article of faith, that because these three Khalistanis died in sequence, therefore it was the work of the Indian government. And now we are still in the situation where we have before us no evidence whatsoever that Indian government agents were responsible for this killing. Now, for the Prime Minister, as you rightly point out, to step up and say, this is our conclusion. He says, of course, well, it's a potential link, and these are credible allegations. He's not saying case closed, but he's acting like it is case closed. He's brought it up to Prime Minister Modi, and he has acted upon the conclusion by kicking out a senior Indian diplomat. So the situation now is that he absolutely has to produce the goods. If he doesn't have the goods, he's finished. He's finished if he doesn't have the goods. He has got to step up and say, he can't just say, oh, it's classified, I can't talk about it, I can't jeopardize the investigation. Well, he's just jeopardized it. He's announced his conclusions in the House of Commons. And the police, by the way, the police have not identified the shooters. They haven't arrested anyone.
Exactly.
How does that happen, that you don't even know who shot?
Exactly.
Who the shooter was?
I believe this happened in the middle of June, and we're now in the middle of September. In the last 4 months or so, we have not seen anyone charged for this crime. There has to be a name in a charge sheet.
Yes,
and then we know who the person responsible for that killing is. But Kamal Sibal, there is a larger sort of issue here, and that is that Mr. Trudeau is doing this for his own domestic politics. Clearly, he is dependent on parties like the National Democratic Party of Jagmeet Singh. There are other smaller coalition partners, and he wants to play nice boy with them, play to those galleries. In the process, what he is costing is the India-Canada diplomatic relationship. Kamal Sibal? All right, we've lost his video. We'll try and go back to him in a minute. But Puneet Sani, please explain that to us. For domestic political compulsions, would any leader want to put a very important diplomatic relationship in this kind of jeopardy?
No, the thing is, thank you, Zaka. Like, this has been going for a very long time, and you have to understand the character of Trudeau. So I'll just give you two examples of what a character Trudeau is. First, if you see, he has immediately backtracked, when the Indian response came. So he is in a way like Khalistani, like you saw Bindranwale, like you saw Deep Sidhu, like you say Amritpal. And they understand only this. If you act firmly, they say pull Sagi pulls and flee. Now, the second thing is, this has actually happened in 2018 as well. And I would really like to address the Canadian audience that may not know what kind of a person Trudeau is. In 2018, when there was a big fiasco in India, when he invited a convicted Khalistani terrorist, Jaspal Atwal, and it became a fiasco. What did Justin Trudeau do? He basically, through his national security advisor, tried to peddle this lie that actually somehow rogue elements of Indian security agency had kind of did this invitation and brought this Khalistani with Trudeau. No, this is so outrageous. And it became controversy. I think the NSA name was Daniel Juan. And, at that time, and then he had to backtrack. So he actually has a history of weaponizing security agencies to get out of international fiascos. So he's a very petty person. And of course, he's compromising because Canada and India should be allies. But because he feels he is humiliated here. So now he has two options, whether to swallow that he is, giving a free rein to these dangerous Khalistanis, or otherwise, double down. And he has chosen to double down, which is of course, bad for the Indian-Canada relations. But in a way, it's good. All this nonsense is actually coming out now.
But Terry
people are becoming aware of it.
Isn't it tone deaf? I mean, the whole world is looking at this. You have all the G7 countries, the entire West, from the United States to UK, Japan, all of them courting India for various reasons. Many of them feel that India would be the serious country to challenge China because US-China is supposed to be the great power competition of our times. All of them are courting this country, and there's one G7 country which is sticking out like a sore thumb. I mean, doesn't this appear politically tone deaf?
Well, it makes no sense at all, does it? I mean, you rightly pointed it out, but the thing is that the mistake I think many people are making now is they're looking at what Trudeau said yesterday in the House of Commons in Ottawa, and they're thinking, well, no prime minister would ever stick his neck out this far unless he had the goods, unless, obviously he has good judgment, he wouldn't have been elected. But listen to the story that Puneet just told you. This was a case where nobody in the Prime Minister's entourage on an important visit to India, nobody realized that it would be a bad idea to invite to dinner, to the Prime Minister's dinner at the High Commissioner's glittering reception, somebody who had been a convicted Khalistani terrorist. They didn't see that that would be a problem. So we have good reason to doubt the judgment of not just the Prime Minister, but the people around him. So now they have obviously made a judgment that the evidence is good enough to create this complete breach in relations, which were previously frosty and now I think are in a deep freeze. Forget the free trade agreement. And he's going to do this on the basis of what exactly? And you mean to tell me that they haven't even identified the shooters yet? The police haven't said anything about some deep, dark plot by the Indian government.
Kamal Sibal, India has, of course, retaliated for the expulsion of the Indian diplomat. They've retaliated by expelling a Canadian diplomat. But beyond this, should India send out a strong message, and how so? I mean, what would be the diplomatic next step if India wants to send out this message that, this is unacceptable? You cannot, the Prime Minister of a country cannot stand up in Parliament and make these allegations without producing an iota of proof. Kamal Sibal, that's to you, sir.
I don't think we should now take another step beyond what we've done already by reacting very sharply to Trudeau's statement in Parliament. I have rarely seen an Indian statement that is so sharp. And we have also expelled a Canadian diplomat. Now, if the situation is to escalate, let it be done on the Canadian side, and then we can explore options.
Why would you say that?
It doesn't serve our purpose to escalate at this stage. As it is, the trade talks have been held up. They're not going to continue, and they're not going to restart in the foreseeable future unless this issue is out of the way. So even there, the relationship will go into some kind of a freeze. Now, there are some issues with regard to how we treat the Khalistani activists there, because they have those OCI cards or PIO cards, and they can enter India. There are connections there. Whether we can take some steps in that direction to make sure that the designated radicals whose identity we should know, and we should have by that time identified them, we can deal with them in this manner, and we can take some other steps with regard to the operation of the Canadian High Commission here and the very close connections with Punjab. Mm-hmm. But I don't think at this stage we need to escalate. And I can't see in what area we can escalate. It's difficult to see that, but it's not the end of the story, Jaka, because he's made this statement in Parliament. Then, for his own reputation, for his own political future, he has to follow through. He can't step back. He can't suddenly say that no, I didn't have evidence. This is not reliable evidence. I sort of misspoke, or I went beyond my writ in Parliament. He's not going to say that. The point is, he's got a minority government. Yeah. He's highly dependent on these 19 Sikh MPs.
Correct.
And Jagmeet Singh, whose links with the Khalistanis are not very clear, but he refuses to acknowledge that there are Khalistani extremists in the country. Mm-hmm. Now, his support is important. Otherwise, he will no longer be Prime Minister, because he's got a minority government. So he has to save his skin. He's not been able to figure out.
Let's be clear that Mr. Trudeau is doing this to pander to a domestic political constituency, which he feels he needs to be on the right side of, because otherwise his government will fall. And if this has nothing to do with diplomacy and the actual allegation that he's come up with, all right, we're getting a piece of breaking news, and I think Kawal Sibal is here, so he can weigh in once we play this breaking news out. So Canada has now updated its travel advisory for Canadians traveling to India. And it says, please exercise a high degree of caution before traveling to India. Now, I find this rather bizarre. I mean, this is not Afghanistan or Pakistan or South Sudan. This is India. This is a functioning democracy. Why would the Canadian government want to, now having done this, issue a travel advisory to its citizens, asking them to exercise a high degree of caution? Now, two things, Kawal Sibal, and you can weigh in on this as a former diplomat. Would this not be seen as A, escalatory? And B, what is the basis of this travel advisory? I mean, India is not an unsafe place for Canadians to travel in.
Firstly, what he really has in mind are Sikhs from Canada traveling to Punjab. Otherwise, there is the danger to non-Sikh Canadians who want to travel to India. So this is part of the same thing, but done indirectly. That if you are insecure on Canadian soil because of Indian agents are killing these terrorists, you may be insecure on Indian soil. That is one. The other thing is that Canada doesn't send many tourists to India, so they can issue this travel advisory. It doesn't have much meaning. We can issue some kind of advisory to the students going to Canada to be very careful in wanting to go to Canada for studies. Discourage them. This can also be done, but I don't think that will be a popular move at this stage. Okay. But there are things that we can do. But one point I want to make, Jaka, which is very serious, which is that indirectly he's equating India with countries like Iran and North Korea.
Exactly.
Who've been accused of killing dissidents or opponents on foreign soil. This is shameful for Trudeau.
Exactly.
To insinuate that kind of a thing. And I'm also surprised that the U.S. National Security Council and the Australian Foreign Ministry have also expressed concern at his allegations. So he's the Five Eyes getting together. This also shows that Canada behind the scenes is desperate to get support from others, because he raised this issue with PM in Delhi and was snubbed.
Okay.
And has been snubbed again very strongly by the Indian Foreign Office.
Okay.
I think at this stage, let's leave it at that and then see
Puneet
how it
Sani,
progresses.
final word. I got to wrap up in 30 seconds, please. Yeah.
So I strongly disagree with, what Ambassador Sibal said. So, for example, he said it's coalition, constraints which is driving Trudeau policy. But as I've actually shown, even when he did not have the constraints in his first term, he went out of his way and, to silence Sikh voices against Khalistan. So I have a case that, it's actually ideology that is, guiding him. And the other, I would say, what the Indian government should do is basically ban the WSO, which is basically leading to all these things. And that is totally in our hands. That is not escalating diplomatic row. And I think that needs to be done, because they have infiltrated the Canadian institutions like Muslim Brotherhood, and they have made, undermined the Canadian democracy. But that is the biggest threat to Indian national security.
We have to leave it at that. But thank you very much, Puneet Sani, Kamal Sibal, and of course, Terry Miliuski for joining us. Like I said, this story just goes from weird to bizarre, now with a travel advisory asking Canadian citizens to exercise a high degree of caution while traveling to India.